This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Review, and what I'm looking at today is the first and only season of Netflix's The Fall of the House of Usher, directed by Mike Flanagan. And if you've paid any attention to this channel at all, you know that this is something that I've been looking forward to for quite a while because Mike Flanagan is one of my favorite directors. And what I was expecting from The Fall of the House of Usher is for him to push the envelope, because as a director of horror, he tends to not really do violence. And that's not to say there isn't violence in his movies, though he never really takes it up a notch. Even the director's cut of Dr. Sleep was not particularly violent. It was slightly more into body horror than the commercially released version, but still not enough to warrant a director's cut by my reckoning. And unfortunately, The Fall of the House of Usher doesn't change that equation. If you've read reviews of this miniseries, 8-episode miniseries, you've heard people throw around the term gory a lot. And to be totally honest, it is not. In each of the 8 episodes, there's a set piece that revolves around typically the death of a member of the Usher family. But most of them aren't gory. And I would say probably 2 of them are. And the death of Tamerlane is particularly effective, though, once again, not particularly gory. In any case, the story revolves around the Usher family, which is run by the patriarch, Roderick Usher, and his sister, Madeline. And they control a company called Fortunato Pharmaceuticals, I believe it is. And they've created a drug which has killed worldwide, I would like to think, millions of people. And this series is very much underneath talking about today in our current times, because you've probably heard the Sacco family and the opioid they created, which killed millions of people, and they settled, I believe, for millions of dollars. They should have been in prison, but corporate criminals. The story starts with Robert Usher having a discussion with August Dupin, a prosecutor that has been after the Usher family for probably years, if not decades. And Dupin finally thinks he has him to rights. And he is surprised to learn that Roderick Usher called him for this conversation to confess to his crimes. And Dupin was genuinely shocked by this because he thought he knew what Roderick Usher had done to achieve his wealth, mainly revolving around the drug I mentioned earlier. Though, what Roderick tells him is that he killed his children. And the miniseries is essentially a confession by Roderick telling August Dupin how he did it and the circumstances behind his action. And here's where things get supernatural, because based upon the confession of Roderick, there is a woman named Verna who is stalking the family and killing Roderick's children. And this is something that Dupin does not believe. But Roderick does believe it. And so, as I said, over the 8 episodes, he tells them how it came about. Though The Fall of the House of Usher is more than that. If you've read Poe at all, his work tends to be about decay. And there is very much a melancholy nature to it. And the series captures that really well. And this is really interesting, this notion of decay, because never mind what Fortunato Pharmaceuticals does to the world in general, the Usher family itself is figuratively eating itself. And Roderick turns the family members against each other by putting a bounty on the head of whomever confessed to Auguste Dupin, or at least whoever he believes confessed to Auguste Dupin. So now the family is literally going after each other. And this is such a fascinating family. First off, everyone acts their asses off, and this helps elevate the material. And as I said, this is not particularly gory. It's intense at points, but it is not gory. Though that intensity carries it through because it's just so well done. This is something that a lot of movies can't seem to get. Either they are weak in the acting department, in which case the intensity matters little, or they're very strongly acted, but the mood isn't struck. With The Fall of the House of Usher, everything just sinks. And while, as you can probably tell, I really, really liked it, I wish it were gorier. I wish it were more explosive. I wish Mike Flanagan had pushed the envelope, which he doesn't do here, but it works. A fascinating thing about Roderick Usher is that he's done terrible things in his life, as the miniseries makes abundantly clear. But one thing he is not is racist. And he clearly draws a line between that, because his family is literally like a Benetton commercial. His family almost runs the entire spectrum of ethnicities. And that's fascinating to me. What the miniseries does particularly well is portrayal of his sister. Roderick's story goes back to their childhood. We see how Madeline has protected him and has helped them. And as they grew older, that bond between brother and sister held firm. So they're both caught up in events. What's interesting, and what you don't often see, is how strong Madeline Usher is. Roderick is very driven himself, but sometimes he needs a little prodding, a little impetus. And Madeline does that. By way of analogy, she's like a fist in a velvet glove. She is probably, by my reckoning, even more dangerous than Roderick because she's more focused. She is, I wouldn't say Madeline Usher is heartless, though she is extremely goal-driven. Nothing matters to her beyond achieving a particular goal. And God forbid you get her way while she tries to do it, because she will literally, not figuratively, kill you. And Roderick tends to go along with her, partially because she is his sister and has protected him throughout his life, though she is such a powerful character, and she's just really interesting. And I mentioned earlier how the idea of decay is such a dominant thing in a lot of Poe's writing. And you see that here as well. What's also impressive is that Mike Flanagan has managed to transfer Poe to the modern age relatively well, which is to say, the times are our own, but the themes and the ideas that Poe was talking about are very much present in Flanagan's work. It's also very clever in the way that it incorporates titles of Poe's work. For instance, there's actually a place in the miniseries called The Rue Morgue. Murders in a Rue Morgue was the Poe story. It's really neat, and if you don't pay attention to it, you'll miss it. But it's just very clever the way Mike Flanagan again and again and again incorporates Edgar Allan Poe's stories into his narrative. And the thing of it is, this is an interpretation of Poe's work. It is not exactly as Poe written it, though there are sequences where Mike Flanagan will incorporate some of Poe's writing into things people are saying, particularly Roderick. And that comes off a little clunky, truth be told, tends to work because Bruce Greenwood, who plays Robert Usher, is such a good actor. So I think it's something that the story would have been better off without, because Flanagan incorporates so many elements of Poe's work. Such literalness is not really necessary. And another thing that really works for The Fall of the House of Usher is that it is genuinely funny. It is filled with dark humor, a lot of it coming from Raquel Coley, who is just hilarious. And what really interests me is that this dark humor is driven by well-written dialogue. Dialogue that fits the characters, but is just hilarious. The Fall of Usher, I think, is a fitting end to Mike Flanagan's work on Netflix. Last I heard, he was going to Amazon, where he hopes to revive his interpretation of Stephen King's Dark Tower books. And to be honest, I'll miss seeing his work on Netflix. I mean, there's still The Haunting of Hill House, The Haunting of Bly Manor, Midnight Mass, and so on. They're always going to be on Netflix. Well, I assume they will. And it's a bit of a bummer that he won't be producing any more content for Netflix in the near future. Though Netflix's loss is Amazon's gain. This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com in review. Do you agree, disagree? Let me know down below. And as usual, consider a like or a follow.